الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So as we continue discussing the book Talkhis Nukhbatul Fikr, and the book is originally authored by Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah. So I mentioned that there's many work around this book of those who have made a talkhis or have summarized, condensed the book of Nukhbatul Fikr, and amongst them one of those who are mu'asir, who is Sheikh Umar Muqbil wafaqahullah ta'ala. So we've been discussing concerning matters pertaining to, as he mentioned, concerning that hadith ينقسم إلى قبل أحد والمتواتر. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he started by mentioning the hadith by way of how it have reached us, wusul ilayna. So the hadith by way of how it has been transmitted and how it have reached us by way of the different turuq, by the different chains, that it falls into two categories. Those that are said to be mutawatir, and we have discussed matters pertaining to hadith mutawatir, and then we start discussing matters pertaining to, as the ulama clarify, yanqasim al-khabar ila ahad. So hadith al-ahad, he started out with mashhur and mustafid, and we discussed matters pertaining to that type of hadith. Then he discussed the next, what we discussed, what he mentioned aziz, and we covered in the last lesson matters pertaining to hadith al-haziz, regarding concerning what's the definition, and that the definition is given by Ibn Hajar rahimahullah regarding hadith al-aziz, that it's a definition that was not the standard, is to become the standard definition that is used since Ibn Hajar until today by most. But if we were to look at the definition of the hadith of hadith al-Haziz, that we find that the ulama prior to Ibn Hajar, that they somewhat add a slight different in how they deem hadith al-Aziz. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he mentioned hadith al-Aziz, and he mentioned أن يكون أقل ما يروي اثنين أو أقل أو لا يزيد في إحدى طبقات. So when you mention that, that is la yarwi, that there's not more than the least in any tabaqat, there's two narrators. So in any of the tabaqat or the different levels of the hadith in the isnad, that we find the least in any of those levels of the hadith, that there's two narrators. So for example, that in one level of the sahaba, you have four. Then above those who have narrated upon them, the tabi'in, kibar tabi'in, we have three. Then we have after that level we have five. Then we have two. Then we have three. So because the least in that five levels, the least is two in the four levels, then that will be considered to be hadith al-aziz, according to Ibn Hajar rahimahullah. So that's concerning what is the general definition that is given by Ibn Hajar, and that's what is mentioned by many after him. But as we mentioned before, that of the ulama who preceded Ibn Hajar alayhi rahmatullah, amongst them An-Nawawi, amongst them Ibn Malakkin, amongst them Sahib al-Bayquniya, also amongst them Ibn Salah, that they defined, and others, that they saw the word hadith al-Haziz is two or three, the least in any of the tabaqat. So if there's three or two in any of the tabaqat, then that hadith is said to be aziz. Ibn Hajar all it as two, they see the minimum to be two or three. So we have discussed some of those points regarding of those things that you find that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, that he somewhat at a position, somewhat a slight difference from what was held by the ulama of hadith before him, and who wrote in Ilm al-Mustalah. So today, Bidnillahi tabaraka ta'ala, we'll proceed by discussing, as he mentioned, regarding a next type of hadith that is considered to be a hadith al-ahad, that he discussed as being, he mentioned here as hadith al-gharib. So Ibn Hajar, he mentioned the next type of hadith that is discussed. He mentioned hadith al-gharib. So in this muqtasar, they mention al-gharib, they mention hadith al-gharib as being the next discussion in brief, where they mentioned that the definition that they gave in this talkhis, they mentioned here an-naw thalith, which is the third type of hadith regarding a hadith al-ahad, al-gharib. Then he mentioned in brackets fard. Then he mentioned what's the definition. So we'll discuss concerning the definition. So he mentioned here, where he mentioned here regarding huwa ma انفرد بروايته راو واحد من الرواة في أي طبقات في أي طبقة من طبقات. So he mentioned regarding concerning what is said to be or defined as hadith al-gharib or slash fard, that he mentioned that definition, that what have been a single narration that or a single narrator narrating in one of the tabaqat, one of the levels of the hadith. So you'll find meaning that in any level of the hadith you'll find only a single narrator, then that is classed as hadith al-gharib or fard. So as for what we'll discuss regarding concerning this discussion, we'll discuss matters pertaining to one, the meaning of gharib, second, lugatan wa istilahan. Then we start to go through different matters that pertain to this particular discussion. So also he mentioned there regarding ينقسم الغريب إلى قسمين, that ulama, also Ibn Hajar, that they divide gharib, hadith al-gharib, that it is categorized into two categories. The first being gharib mutlaq, and also he mentioned gharib nisbi. So gharib, that it is divided into two categories. One of those categories is referred to as gharib mutlaq, and the second gharib nisbi. So we'll go through and discuss all of those with amthila, with examples and the likes. So as for what is discussed regarding the books of Musalah that explain this particular discussion, to without going to all what is mentioned, that the first point of discussion that they mentioned, so they mentioned regarding concerning hadith al-gharib. So the meaning of hadith al-gharib. So what is meant or understood istilahan by the ulama of hadith as hadith al-gharib. So first point of reference that they'll mention gharib lugatan. They'll mention hadith gharib lugatan. So they have mentioned regarding concerning the word gharib linguistically, that they'll mention regarding concern that not mean concern it's not fard. So gharib said that bahid and watani, that a person who is gharib is said to a person that is a person who is like a traveler, a person who's away from his place of origins. So that's gharib linguistically. So the person like is so that's what is intended by gharib, like bod, something which is infirad. So this is meant by gharib linguistically, infirad, or they mentioned bod or ba'id and watani, a person that is away from his place of residence or is where he is established. So that's the meaning linguistically, infirad. Then they mention regarding concerning that al-gharib, that how it is defined, or how it is istilahan, according to the ulama of hadith, as stated by Ibn Hajar rahimullah, that he mentioned regarding concerning that hadith al-gharib, that he state regarding أن تكون الغريب إما أن تكون في أصل. They mentioned that al-gharib So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, when he stated regarding concerning that hadith al-gharib, that he mentioned ghuraba, and then he mentioned that al-gharib ما انفرد واحد في إحدى طبقات. So he mentioned that ما انفرد واحد أو أحد الراوي في إحدى طبقات الحديث or sanad. So it is meaning of which is that you'll find that in one of the levels of the isnad, that you'll find that only a single narrator. So you might find one, or a next level you have three, a next level you have four, then you have a next level you have five. So when you look at the different tabaqat, levels of the hadith, you'll find that in one of the levels there's only one narrator. So that we refer to as hadith al-gharib. So look to as to the aqal, the least amount of narrator in one of the tabaqat, and that they will decide as to what name the hadith is referred to as by way of the isnad. So look to see, so if it is one narrator, then that is said to be hadith al-gharib. If it is two, then it is said to be hadith aziz, and that's the least amount in any of the tabaqat. And if there's three or more, then it is said to be mashhur, according to what Ibn Hajar holds. And if it is and if it is go to a large number, as we have discussed, then it's considered to be mutawatir. So to look to the least amount in any of the tabaqat, and depending the amount of narrator in of those, the least narrator, then the hadith will be given the name accordingly. So as for Hadith al-Aziz, as mentioned, that it is where I mentioned that concerning that hadith الذي تفردد بروايته راو واحد في أي موضع من الإسناد. So you find that one narrator is in one of the levels of the isnad. So that's concerning hadith al-gharib. Then that's concerning the definition of gharib. Then we find concerning that now what have been mentioned by the ulama regarding this term hadith al-gharib. It is something which is mentioned by the ulama. So it is something which is known regarding concerning that I mentioned that the ulama have used this term regarding hadith al-gharib. It is something which is known amongst the ulama of the past. And of the ulama who have spoken regarding hadith al-gharib and how they look at those hadith, that Imam Malik rahimahullah have stated regarding hadith al-gharib, قال شر العلم غريب, that he mentioned that the shar, he said the most evil of knowledge is that which is, or the strangest of knowledge, that which is gharib, something, the hadith which is something that it is singled out, it is something which is strange. Then I mention al-khabar, and I mention خير العلم, that the best of knowledge, al-zahir, that which is apparent and widespread, الذي قد راه الناس, where the people, many people have transmitted this information. So it means Imam Malik rahimahullah kind of somewhat he owes concerning shar al-ilm, that the most evil of knowledge, or that which you have to be very cautious regarding that matters, thing which is gharib, something which is not not something which is not common. It is odd. And he mentioned regarding khayr al-ilm, the best of knowledge, as he state, al-zahir, that which is apparent. And he mentioned alladhi, which is apparent, alladhi qad rawahu an-nas, something which is transmitted by many of the people. So that's concerning Imam Malik rahimahullah cautioning regarding thing which is gharib, and of this concerning hadith al-gharib. You find that also Ibrahim an-Nakha'i rahimahullah ta'ala, that he said regarding hadith al-gharib, قال كانوا يقرؤون غريب الحديث. So they mentioned that concerns, I mean concerning the Salaf, كانوا يقرؤون, that they disliked غريب الحديث وغريب الكلام, that the Salaf, those before, that they dislike, they were very cautious regarding غريب الحديث, these strange hadith, single narration of hadith, and also غريب الكلام, and also kalam that is not common. So that of those caution regarding, and Ahmed rahimahullah, Ahmed ibn Hanbal rahimahullah قال regarding this matter, شر الحديث, that the worst of hadith, غرائب, are those which is of those type that are said to be غراهب, that are those single narration, single transmitted narrations, الذي لا يعمل به, that is something that it is not acted upon, ولا يؤتمد عليها, and also people doesn't use as a reference, people doesn't stand by this. So that's true concern of the ulama, that they were somewhat cautious regarding this matter, that regarding a matter that are said to be gharib. And as they state concerning that, you find this occur, as they said, كانوا يكتبوا هذه أحاديث الغرائب, that the Salaf لا تكتبوا هذه أحاديث الغرائب, that they did not like to record these type of hadith that are said to be strange. فإنها مناكر, because you have a lot of things that are manakir, things that were weak, that relates to them, وآمتها عن الضعفاء, and a lot of this, it is transmitted by those people who are said to be the du'afa, that the weak narrators. So the ulama, they kind of somewhat at a position which is that to be cautious regarding hadith that are said to be gharib at times, as you find in some of those cases, a lot of things that are manakir, things that are rejected, I mentioned those hadith, or things that are not authentic, I mentioned those hadith, and also so things that are strange, and also that in most, a lot of those things are related by narrators who are said to be du'afa. So that's concerning of the ulama who had that stance and that caution regarding hadith al-gharib. So that's the third matter. So we discussed concerning the definition of gharib, istilahan in the ulama al-hadith, as we said, that in those hadith al-gharib, where you find that in one of the tabaqat, one of the levels of hadith, you find only a single narrator. There's a single narrator in that isnad. So in that tabaqa. So look to the least amount of narrator in any of the levels of the hadith, and that will decide as to what name that hadith will be referred to as, whether gharib or aziz or mashhur. The next matter they discuss regarding concerning that hadith al-gharib, that Then they discuss concerning that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, then he classify hadith concerning hadith into two levels or two types. So hadith al-gharib, that is said to be of two types, or they mentioned that he mentioned gharib al-nisbi wa gharib al-mutlaq. So of the ulama who that they have categorized hadith into those two categories. So as for hadith, that and at times the word hadith al-gharib is also referred to as I mentioned, gharib also used concerning the word fard. So at times the word gharib, amongst the ulama of hadith, they use the word fard. So you find the word gharib mutlaq or fard mutlaq. So as we said, as mentioned by Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, that hadith al-gharib is of two categories. The first, gharib al-mutlaq or fard al-mutlaq, and also gharib al-nisbi or gharib or fard al-nisbi. So as for discussing those that the ulama mentioned regarding concerning that what's the difference between both? What is hadith that is referred to as gharib mutlaq or /fard mutlaq? It is defined as, or it is stated that it is defined as ma waqa tafarrud fihi fi asl isnad. So gharib al mutlaq is when that single narrator, it is found, it appears at the asl of the isnad, which is the root of the isnad. So it is found at the root of the isnad, then that is said to be gharib al mutlaq or fard al mutlaq. So gharib mutlaq is when a single narrator is found, is mentioned at the root, the beginning of the isnad. So I go back to what I said, the asl isnad. So the ulama of hadith, they discuss or clarify what is asl isnad. So the next matter is trying to understand what is asl isnad. Asl isnad, that of what is referred to as at times the asl isnad is said to be the awwal isnad or manshal isnad or akhiru. So meaning concerned, I mean in all of this what is meant, that asl isnad, the root of isnad, it goes back to the sahaba. So the sahaba, they are considered to be of the asl, the root or the beginning or the first in the isnad, the first in line in the isnad. So a person, when I use the word asl isnad, it means that they are speaking of the isnad but in reference to the jia from the side of the sahaba. So they are said to be the asl isnad, awwal isnad, also manshal isnad. This is said to be from by way of the sahaba. They are considered to be the asl of the isnad. Then a slight then they mention that by way of looking concerning. So that's concerning the sahaba and the tabi'un who narrates upon them. That's the asl of the isnad. The asl of the isnad goes back to from the side of the sahaba, not by way of looking at the one who's the author of the book or who have compiled the hadith. So Bukhari would have an isnad that goes back to the sahaba. So the asl of the isnad will go back to from the jia, from the side of the sahaba, not by way of Imam Bukhari. So he's not considered to be awwal isnad or manshal isnad. Imam Bukhari or Muslim Abu Dawood, they're not considered, but rather they're considered to be the finality of the isnad, the end of the isnad. So when I mention regarding concern that, so fard mutlaq or gharib al mutlaq, it means that from either from the sahaba or from the tabi'in, you have a single narrator, and then on it might increase in number or might continue as having only a single narrator. So that's concerning what is said to be hadith al-gharib al-mutlaq or hadith fard al-mutlaq, where we have a single narrator from the side of the sahaba or the tabi'in. And they give example regarding concern, the more famous of that example of this is the hadith that is found إنما الأعمال بالنيات. إنما الأعمال بالنيات, the hadith that's narrated by Umar al-Khattab. So they mentioned that with this hadith that we find, if we go back to Sahih Bukhari itself, so you find that in Sahih Bukhari, so Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, in the opening of his book, the first hadith that is mentioned, so Imam Bukhari in his Sahih, this is Fathul Bari, but also it have the hadith of, when they mentioned the first hadith in this isnad, he mentioned قال, Imam Bukhari rahimahullah قال, in this instance, قال حدثني أو حدثنا الحميدي Abdullah ibn Zubair. That is one of his shuyukh from Mecca. Then he mentioned قال حدثنا سفيان قال حدثنا يحيى ابن سعيد الأنصاري قال أخبرني محمد ابن إبراهيم التيمي أنه سمع علقمة ابن وقاص الليثي يقول سمعت عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه قال على منبر. So they mention a hadith. The hadith meaning upon the Prophet ﷺ قال إنما الأعمال بالنيات. So he mentioned regarding concern. So this hadith is used as an example regarding that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, that he started the book with a hadith which is gharib mutlaq. Hadith gharib al-mutlaq. And they mentioned regarding concern the only person from the Sahaba that have transmitted this hadith with authentic isnad is Umar al-Khattab. Even though he mentioned ala mimbar, that he heard this hadith from the Prophet ﷺ on the mimbar. So the Prophet ﷺ, that Imam al-Khattab mentioned this hadith on the mimbar, and he heard this hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. Then they mentioned that Umar was the only one who heard from the Sahaba. Then also from those who transmitted upon Umar, the narrator Alqamah ibn Waqas al-Laythi is the only one who narrated upon Umar. Then also after him, the narrator Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Taymi is the only one who narrated his hadith up from Alqamah, and Alqamah is the only one that narrated from Umar al-Khattab, and Umar is the only one from the Prophet ﷺ. Then I mentioned after then Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, who then after the hadith became widespread. So as I mentioned that with Umar, Alqamah, and also Muhammad, and also that this hadith is somewhat said to be of that category. So you'll find in about 4 levels where Yahya ibn Sa'id, that the hadith is said to be of only a single narrator who have transmitted this hadith. So I mentioned that this is of the example that is used by the ulama as hadith regarding fard, as they mentioned hadith al-gharib al-mutlaq. So from the asl of the hadith, by way of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een, is only one single narrator. Umar only on the Prophet. Then we find from Umar, then as the hadith it mentioned that Alqamah narrated upon Umar. Then after Alqamah on Muhammad ibn Ibrahim, then also Yahya ibn Sa'id. So this hadith is said to be gharib mutlaq on different levels. Then afterward, hadith became widespread. So that's the hadith is used regarding an example of hadith, as we said, gharib mutlaq, and also referred to as fard mutlaq. Then that will gharib, or said fard mutlaq, gharib mutlaq, that hadith, it may have from the beginning and also continue for a while, then become widespread, as in the case of the hadith of Umar that we have mentioned here. So also they mentioned another hadith regarding hadith Shub al-Iman, hadith of the hadith of Abu Hurairah anhu, that they mentioned regarding concern that hadith that they mentioned regarding that tafarrad bihi Abu Saleh, that one narrator who's Abu Saleh is the only one that narrate upon Abu Hurairah. And then after Abu Saleh, the narrator upon him who's Abdullah ibn Dinar is the only one who narrated hadith from Abu Saleh, and Abu Saleh is the only one that narrated from Abu Hurairah. Hadith Shub al-Iman of the Prophet ﷺ. So they mentioned regarding concerning that these are example regarding hadith gharib mutlaq, from the asl of the hadith, from the root of the hadith, from the start of the hadith, from by way of the Sahaba or the Tabi'een, you don't have a single narrator. Then that's concerning that category of hadith gharib. The next category is, as they refer to as gharib nisbi or fard nisbi. That's the second category of hadith al-gharib. So they mention regarding concern that this is referred to, as the ulama have mentioned concerning that al-gharib al-nisbi or /fard al-nisbi. What is this? Huwa ma waqa tafarrud. We find that the tafarrud, a single narrator, is mentioned fihi in the isnad, fi ithna as-sanad, in the isnad, in the center of the isnad. Which mean by center is concerned anyone after the asl of the isnad. So the asl of the isnad, the Sahaba Tabi'een. After then you find that a single narrator is within the center of the isnad, within, that comes after the asl. So that's concerning the difference between both. So one fard mutlaq, gharib mutlaq, when the single narrator is mentioned at the start of the isnad, then any point after the start of the isnad then is referred to as gharib nisbi, gharib nisbi. And also gharib nisbi also, it falls into different categories. Also for gharib nisbi, it falls into different categories or different types. So that's concerning what is mentioned. So an example that regarding this hadith, as they mentioned, gharib nisbi, fard nisbi, that they give an example of the Prophet ﷺ, that they mention the Prophet ﷺ said in this hadith that is narrated by Tirmidhi rahimahullah, where he mentioned al-mu'min ya'kul fi mi'an wahid. So a mu'min ya'kul, so a mu'min, a true believer, he eats from one like intestine. Then they mention that hadith that's narrated, this hadith is narrated from 4 Sahaba: Ibn Umar, Abu Hurairah, Jabir, and the 4th, Abu Musa al-Ashari. So this hadith that a Muslim only eat from one intestine, that this hadith is narrated from 4 companions: Ibn Umar, Abu Hurairah, Jabir, and the 4th being Abu Musa al-Ashari. Then I mentioned that, look at the hadith that you find concerning that hadith, that if you go to, so 4 Sahaba, but the narration of Abu Musa al-Ashari, that you find that you have Abu Musa, so you find 4 Sahaba narrate the same hadith. But then you find that on Ibn Umar, a lot of people narrate from him. The narration of Abu Hurairah, that chain of many narrators narrating from Abu Hurairah. The 3rd, who is Jabir, you find many narrating upon him. But the narration of Abu Musa, which is the 4th narration of Abu Musa al-Ashari, you find only one person narrate upon Abu Musa, Abu Burda. And then you'll find Buraid ibn Abdullah, Hamad. So you'll find that, so in this hadith, you'll find that the narration, that hadith have 4 companions: Ibn Umar, Abu Hurairah, 3rd, Jabir, and the 4th, that of Abu Musa al-Ashari. And Abu Musa al-Ashari side, that you'll find that with his narration, that you find, as they mentioned regarding concerning that this narration, that lam yarwi anhu yani Abu Musa al-Ashari ghayru ibnuhu, who's Abu ibn Burda, so only his son narrate upon him. And also of his son Abu Burda, that you find that Ibn Buraid ibn Abdullah is the only one that narrate upon him. Then also you find that Hamad ibn Usama is the only one that narrate upon him. So you find this narration, it is like this narration. And also they mention that on this you find that Hamad, that you find Ibn Qurayb also the same. So you find this narration that many companions, but in one of the narration, so it becomes this, we find in one of the chains or one of the narrations, which is Abu Musa, is Fard Nisbi, whereof he is the only one that it separates from the others. It separates from the others. So you find that that's concerning, they mention as Fard Nisbi. So you find the same hadith, but in one of the narrations of those 4 companions is considered to be to that person, Abu Musa, it is Fard or Gharib Nisbi, because to his narration. As to the others, it is not. So those 4, if you were to compare them, one narration is Fard and Nisbi to him, Abu Musa, to the other it is not. So that's concerning Fard and Nisbi. At times ulama mention that, find that al-Fard and Nisbi, as mentioned, that you might find that a particular isnad may have many chains, but it may be particular, one certain chains may be, or that hadith may be particular to a particular group of people from a particular group of narrators from the same region. The hadith is said to be Basriyin. So the hadith becomes nisbah, so it becomes that fard nisbah to the people of a particular region. So, and also to a particular city, or could be by way of a sifa. So al-fard and nisbi, that also it falls into different categories. It falls into different categories. So that's concerning something that I mentioned. So that goes into more details regarding concerning that particular those type of hadith. But fard and nisbi, then also it goes into different categories. At times it's related to a particular narrator or narration, where you find amongst the narration of that hadith, or it go back to a particular sifatul mu'ayyan, or the narration is, it is narrated in a particular way, or a particular place, or the narration is known as so. These are those things that that affect, that is discussed amongst hadith, gharib, and nisbi. So that's concerning, or they said, to a particular balad, to a particular balad, to a particular region. That, for example, they mentioned that the hadith that is mentioned by Abu Dawood and others, where the Prophet ﷺ in this hadith, where it mentioned, Umirna an naqra bi fatihati kitab wa ma tayassir. So they mentioned this hadith, that we were commanded that we should read, Umirna an naqra, that we were commanded to read al-Fatiha and something with it. Something with it. What we are able. They mentioned that Rawahu Abu Dawood, and it mentioned that this hadith called concerns now. They mentioned this hadith. They mentioned that Abu Dawud and Abu Walid at-Tayalisi and Humam and Qatada ibn Abu Nadra and Abu Sa'id bihi. So the hadith of Abu Sa'id, they mentioned concerning قال حاكم تفرد بذكر الأمر فيه أهل البصرة. So I mentioned that when the hadith mentioned Umirna, the people of Basra are the only one who used that word, compared to other narrators who did not mention that word, Umirna. So they mentioned that the word, that command, is only particular to the people of Al Basra. Others who narrate this hadith, they do not mention that Umirna. They do not mention Umirna. So they say that is this is Gharib al-Nisbi to the people of Basra regarding that particular wording. So that's concerning that particular of those things that are included in a discussion regarding Hadith al-Gharib. The next of those things that they discuss regarding concerning Madan. Some of the books that may discuss, that what we might find hadith that are said to be of this category. Books. So you find that the books that may contain hadith of this type, they can be put into two categories. Books of hadith that are general, but these hadith are mentioned and stated numerously or mentioned a lot. And of those works that you'll find these hadith that are somewhat mentioned, many, is the book of Al-Jami' al-Tirmidhi. So Imam al-Tirmidhi rahimahullah in his Jami' al-Tirmidhi, that he will highlight cases of hadith we said that fall into gharib. You'll mention hadith al-gharib. So you'll mention and highlight these cases when he will comment about sunnah hadith. And of those works, also second, a book that is called Musnad al-Bazzar. So the work of Musnad al-Bazzar, also that book is in print. Also, it have some hadith, he mentioned hadith that are said to be gharib. Hadith which are said to be gharib. Also, you will find these hadith. So you find other hadith, but amongst those hadith that I mentioned in those book, so it's a general book in hadith, but he will cite many hadith that are said to be gharib within this book. Also, third of those works, Mu'jam al-Kabir, or Mu'jam al-Awsat, or Mu'jam al-Saghir by at-Tabarani. So Tabarani rahimahullah, he has the call Ma'ajim al-Thalatha. Mu'jam al-Kabir, Mu'jam al-Awsat, or Mu'jam al-Saghir. All three are in print. Mu'jam al-Kabir, a portion of it is in print, not the entire thing. But overall, that in these books, that you find a lot of hadith, we said the Gharaib, hadith which is said to be Gharahib, that are contained in these particular three books of At-Tabarani, rahimahullah ta'ala. Then also you find, so the next category of books that are said, books that are particular on this topic, where the author, that he intend only to collect hadith that are said to be gharib. So of those works that are mentioned is a book that they mention, of those books, Afrad li Imam ad-Daraqutni, they mention li Daraqutni. So Afrad li Daraqutni. So this is what we have in print, which is called Kitab Atraf Garahib wal Afrad li Daraqutni. So Daraqutni rahimahullah, one of the kibar a'immat al-hadith, and have written in various areas of ilm al-hadith. So of those works that he worked on is regarding collected hadith, which is said to be gharib or garaib. So this is not the original book of Ad-Daraqutni, that another of the ulama who came after, which is, they mention Al-Hafiz Abu Fadl ibn Muhammad ibn Tahir ibn Maqdisi, one of the Maqadisi, that known for hadith concerns now, that he kind of somewhat rearranged the book. So it is called, so he rearranged the book of Ad-Daraqutni, rahimahullah ta'ala, and made the book upon Masanid. So the book is upon Masanid, based upon narrators, which is, so that's concerning this book. The book is in print, so it's so those are books that are particular to that particular field, which is Hadith al-Gharib or Gharaib. And also another book with Afrad by Ibn Shaheen. So Ibn Shaheen also have written on this topic, Hadith that relates to Gharaib. The next, so those are books that are written on this particular topic. Not that you might find that ulama have written a book regarding Hadith al-Aziz. So we didn't mention, to my knowledge, that ulama who have somewhat of the past that have written a book regarding Hadith al-Aziz. We said Hadith al-Aziz, we find only two. The least in the isnad is two narrators, to my knowledge, and that is open for correction. That I do not know of any book written specifically on that topic that are in print, to my knowledge, and Allah Ta'ala alam. Then they mention the next of those things regarding Hadith al-Gharib or Gharaib, that they mentioned regarding what's the hukum regarding Hadith al-Gharib. Now, as we mentioned, because the ulama, we stated before, a lot of the ulama, they're very cautious regarding Hadith al-Gharaib. So they're very cautious regarding Hadith which is Gharib. So they mentioned regarding the hukum regarding Hadith al-Gharib, regarding in ilm al-Hadith, passing a judgment or passing a grading on the Hadith, because it is said to be Gharib. It doesn't mean Hadith is Gharib that automatically it is Daif. No, automatically Sahih. So the Hadith will be graded, the Hadith will be studied, and the appropriate judgment will be passed on Hadith based upon it fulfilling the criteria of Maqbool or not. Or being Hadith being of those that are acceptable, Sahih or Hasan, then it will, because it fulfilled that criteria, then it will consider to be Sahih. And if it does not, then consider it to be Daif and or the appropriate ruling for the Hadith. So Hadith regarding Gharaib is not like every Hadith. So it's not like we have a general ruling that is passed on Hadith Gharaib or Hadith al-Gharib, that they are weak or they are authentic. It's each Hadith will be studied, and the appropriate ruling or the appropriate grading will be given to the Hadith based upon the principles of Ilm al-Hadith. So amongst them, you find Hadith, which is essentially the Hadith in Sahih Bukhari, which is the first Hadith, is of Hadith al-Gharib, but it's authentic. And in many places, many tabaqat is said, and also if we look in the last Hadith in Sahih Bukhari, we'll find the same. So the ulama mentioned also, if you look at the last Hadith and of Bukhari, which some intend that Imam Bukhari rahimah wished to refute of those people, refute certain people regarding that, he mentioned that Hadith al-Gharib, as we'll discuss later, that Hadith, whether it is Gharib, Aziz or Mashhur, that if Hadith is said to be authentic, then a Muslim should accept it and act according to it. And you feed al-ilm. So Hadith al-Sahih, it feed that the person that you feed al-ilm. That what is that it affirms ilm, it affirms ilm. And also something to be acted upon unless there's a reason to say otherwise. So it's not a condition for us to accept a hadith, whether in matters concerning hadith, whether matter is ittiqad, aqadiyya, or amaliyya, ahkam al-shar'iyya, or fadail al-amal, that the hadith after, or things regarding al-ghaib, things of the unseen, that the hadith has to be mutawatir. The fact that hadith is sahih, then it is accepted. So Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, at the end, he mentioned at the end of his book, in his end of his sahih, that he mentioned that the final hadith in that book he mentioned, قال حدثنا أحمد ابن إشكاب قال حدثنا محمد ابن فضيل عن عمارة ابن قعقاع عن أبي زرعة عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال رسول الله قال النبي عليه السلام, the Prophet عليه السلام says كلمتان, that there's two words, حبيبتان إلى الرحمن, that there's two words that are beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it shows regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, يحب أشياء. Nam, so these are two words or sentence, two words that are beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the word kalimatan mean two sentence. Nam, habibatan ila rahman, that are beloved to ar-Rahman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Khafifatan, ala lisan, and they're somewhat very easy on the tongue. Thaqilatan, very heavy, fil mizan. That he mentioned, what are these two words? Subhanallah wa bihamdi, Subhanallah al-Azim. So those two words, so it means concerning two sentences. So the first would be Subhanallah wa bihamdi, and the second would be Subhanallah al-Azim. So those two words are beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that they're easy on the tongue, and also they're weighty on the scale. So this hadith have many points regarding matters regarding Aqadiyah, but we said that generally concerning this hadith, that ulama refer to as concerning that this hadith, that it is said to be of those hadith that are said to be of hadith gharib, that single narrators regarding those narration. So the next, then you have al-gharaib regarding afrad, regarding certain afrad, regarding certain shakhs, regarding individuals. Now, so you might find concerning that matters regarding tafarrudat al-buldan. So regarding, as we mentioned before, that in matters regarding gharib, that you might find of tafarrud, things that are maybe particular to particular buldan. Also, you might find regarding tafarrudat al-ashkhas, where you find that in cases, certain narrators is the only one that have transmitted a particular hadith, or with a particular wording, or with additional wording. So also those are looked upon and studied, and the appropriate ruling is given to them. At times it may be acceptable, and at times it may be weak. So that's concerning also they mention the ulama of sometimes they use also other different wording indicating meaning similar to hadith al-gharib. So other wordings that are used by the ulama that give the meaning of hadith al-gharib. So this is for the person who in ilm al-hadith understanding the different type of wording or terminology that are used, meaning the same, something similar. So different words that are used but meaning the same. So of the ulama they have used concerning that of this different word that they use regarding this matter, that we mentioned that they use the word fa'ida wa nadira. At times they use the word fa'ida wa nadira. So you find, for example, Ibn Adi rahimahullah ta'ala, that call an qawl Ibn Aruba Harrani في حسان كرماني قال كأن حديثه كلها فوائد أي غرائب. So use the word فوائد. So talking about a narrator who is Hisan Kirmani, كأن حديثه, that is hadith كلها فوائد. All his hadith is fawaid, but fawaid it mean not a benefit. So fawaid we said in English would mean that it is of benefit. So this word fawaid, it doesn't mean a benefit. It means garaib, something which is strange. Or we use a single word, strange, but it means, as we have said before, that is a single narrator. Also you find ulama there with sometimes written books, and the book we call Kitab Fawaid. So you find a book in hadith written by one of the ulama of hadith, especially of the past. They said that book Kitab Fawaid. So they mentioned Kitab Fawaid Mashayikhi. So also a book that's called Fawaid Tamam, but that they discuss only hadith which is gharib. So what they use the word Fawaid. So this word Fawaid at times with the ulama of hadith, it is to be understood they mean another word that is used as for gharib. So a synonym for gharib according to the dictionary of the ulama of hadith. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he mentioned قال أحمد بن حنبل إذا سمعت أصحاب الحديث يقول, if you hear the people hadith يقول هذا حديث غريب, that this hadith is gharib, أو فائدة فاعلم أنه خطأ. So use the word إذا هذا حديث غريب أو فائدة, mean that they are same thing. قال فاعلم أنه خطأ, that an error that the error has occurred, that there is something that you have to be cautious regarding this hadith. So the word we said, another word that they use is nadira. Another word, nadira. Ahmed rahimahullah, I mentioned, قال Abdullah ibn Ahmed, قال Abdullah ابن أحمد قال حدثني أبي يعني أحمد بن حنبل أملاه علينا في نوادر. So like إملاء, something was transmitted to him or something was dictated to him. علينا, that was dictated upon him. في نوادر غرائب. So hadith, what these hadith are, hadith which are said to be غرائب. So that's concerning of those matters to bear in mind regarding. Then I mentioned that Abu Naim قال حدثناه سليمان ibn Ahmed, that Sulaiman ibn Ahmed have narrated to him Abu Naim fi nawadir. So again the word nawadir being mentioned meaning غرائب. So that's concerning of those things to take into account regarding this matter. So there's other things that are discussed regarding hadith these matters, but inshallah ta'ala that is sufficient. I would say, this is for somewhat a beginner or a person above a beginner. So these lessons is for a person who have already done a book in Mustalah al-Hadith, or have an interest in Hadith and want to study to a certain extent, above a beginner's level of, I've ended the book of Baykuniyah and the likes, or Al-Qab al-Hadith, and I want to discuss something a little more, or I've gone through something that this level is more for a person of that level, and even a beginner, but have great interest in Ilm al-Hadith. So that's concerning this particular topic regarding, as the author mentioned, regarding Hadith al-Gharib. So said that Hadith al-Gharib we have discussed. Tarif is definition linguistically, and also the meaning istilahan. There's other definition that's given, for example, that Shamunni, one of those who have explained Nukhbatul Fikr. So as we had mentioned before, or had mentioned that Shamunni, of those that Ibn Hajar, a person of the time of Ibn Hajar, a contemporary of Ibn Hajar, that Ibn Hajar, when he wrote the book Nukhbatul Fikr, then Shamunni, he came and did another of it, and also explained the book. And this before Ibn Hajar was still alive. So it showed that the book at that level of acceptance. And then Ibn Hajar, when after then he wrote his explanation to to clarify things from his perspective on what he intended. So the book I've gotten, I said, mention a lot of attention from in the time while Ibn Hajar rahimahullah was alive. People who explained the book, and then he went on to explain this book. And Shamunni, his explanation is in print, and also his son worked on the book of Ibn Hajar. So overall, regarding concerning that, he mentioned regarding when he defined Hadith Gharib, he mentioned Hadith Infarad bi riwayatihi, that something that a person, someone who have a single person who have narrated something, or bi amrin fi matni, or something that is strange in the matin, or something which is singled out in the text of the hadith, or fi isnad, or fi isnadihi shakhsun wahid fi ayyi tabaqat kanat dhalik infirad. We find a single narrator in any of the levels of hadith, but he mentioned something which is fil matin or fi isnad. So that's how he defined gharib. So overall, we mentioned the meaning of gharib as mentioned by Ibn Hajar, and what is the general understanding of gharib al-hadith. Also, when I use the word, when it is the different types of gharib al-hadith, whether it is fall as gharib al-mutlaq or gharib al-nisbi. Gharib al-mutlaq of the word to the factor is at the asl isnad. We find a single narrator from the asl of the isnad, which is the mentioned the sahabi or the tabi'i from the asl of the isnad. Then also you'll find that the next type, we'll give an example. Then also mentioned the second category of hadith, gharib and slash fard, which is gharib and nisbi. We'll find that this occur not at the asl but after the asl. So in the center of the hadith. Then this a single narrator, it occurs. Then also with gharib and nisbi, it could be also in some cases, that's also as its subcategories. Could be one person, a particular person, region, and the likes. So it falls into different categories or subcategories. Then also we discuss concerning matters regarding of some of the works that we can find hadith, that we may find hadith of this nature, of this type. We mentioned At-Tirmidhi rahimahullah in his Al-Jami', and also Tabarani in his Ma'ajim, and also and others that then we have books that are specific to this particular topic, amongst them Afrad, Ad-Daraqutni, and also Ibn Shaheen, to my knowledge, also to verify that even one and others who have written on that topic, and we discussed some other factors. Was the hukum regarding hadith al-gharib, that it based upon so hadith al-gharib, it is based upon that is the hadith it is studied, and then the appropriate ruling will be passed. So each hadith after studied, then the appropriate ruling will pass on the hadith regarding the hadith being authentic or not. Then different terms that are used regarding hadith al-gharib, which is fawahid and also nadira or nawadir, and so that's concerning matters pertaining to this particular discussion regarding hadith al-gharib. A person wishing now to go further into this, you have some books that have been written on this particular topic. So you have books that are topic led on this topic. Of those books are books that will give you more detail. The book which is referred to, the book which is Sharh al-Ilal li-Tirmidhi by Ibn Rajab, which is a very important book, which will be an advanced level regarding Ilm al-Mustalah, especially concerning Ilm al-Ilal to be studied, which is the book which is Sharh al-Ilal at-Tirmidhi by Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala, and also others who have written on this topic, which is a book called I'lal Hadith al-Gharib bi Hadith al-Mashhur li Sa'id Muhammad. So that's concerning those who wish to look into this topic further, and also books of Mustalah that will also go in further detail on this topic. So that inshallah ta'ala we have now covered this type of hadith, which is Hadith al-Gharib or Hadith al-Fard, as mentioned here by Ibn Hajar rahimahullah in his Nukhbatul Fikr, and we're using this talqis and Nukhbatul Fikr. So that inshallah ta'ala will end our session today and continue regarding what he covers next. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل والآخر والحمد لله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.